To say that Fire Emblem Engage's writing gets a bad rap is an understatement, both in regards to its story and its characters. The exact reasons why are a little beyond the goals of this video. I do, however, want to try and prove that Engage's character writing is not nearly as bad as some make it out to be, using a character that I've seen plenty of people point to as proof of it. Céline is often used as an example of the supposed flaw of modern Fire Emblem character writing, that she's just a gimmick and that all of her characterization is based around it. T, in her case. I want to showcase Céline's fascinating depth, to shed light on the underlying tragedy of her character and her internal conflict between her ideals and her actions. I also wish to demonstrate that her gimmick is an integral part of that depth, that it actually enriches her character rather than detracts from it. So, where better to start than with why T is so important to Céline. Of Céline's 12 support chains, 3 heavily involve T. Her supports with Lapis, Jean, and Louis. Arguably 4 if you want to count her supports with Etier. So, with either a quarter or a third of her supports spotlighting her relationship with T, what do these supports actually tell us? Céline's supports with Louis are by far the most straightforward. Their support chain mainly shows Céline at her most conventionally kind. The main conflict of these supports being that she doesn't want Louis to put himself in harm's way just to procure her some tea. In their A support, she tells him that what she really values during their tea time is getting to spend time with him, not getting to drink delicious, exotic teas. Spending time with the people she loves is one of her small joys. Put a pin in that. We'll be returning to Céline's idea of small joys later in the analysis. Her support chain with Jean is primarily a Jean-centric one, however it does reveal something surprisingly crucial to Céline's character. The reason she drinks tea is because it's a relaxing activity. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a very impressive conclusion, or anything all that interesting either. You could very easily argue that Céline's supports with Louis basically say the exact same thing, if implicitly. And I would agree. But in her Jean support, she specifically says that T had saved her life. That's a very weighty statement. So, is there more to it than just the face value logic that T has saved her life because she drinks it with her friends, which in turn brings her joy? Well, for all the times T is mentioned across all of Céline's in-game interactions, it was hard to miss just how often the scents of the various teas were mentioned. It was specifically the scent, not the taste. And I think I know why. In Céline's bond supports with Camilla and Crom, she specifically brews them teas that remind them of their homelands, Nor and Elise respectively, in order to bring them some familiarity and comfort whilst in an alien world. It's not just for the emblems either. For example, she also does the same for Jean and Hortensia in their A supports too. I'm sure you've heard of this phenomenon before. It's called the Proust effect. But to drastically simplify it, it basically posits that the senses, and specifically smell, have the power to trigger memories. Yeah, like nature's very own form of nostalgia, if you will. It seems likely to me then that Céline uses tea to ease her allies by evoking memories of their homes, and better, more peaceful times in their lives. Of course, the same is presumably true for Céline. Céline's own life is, and has been, miserably complicated, another topic we'll be discussing later. Even so, I have no doubt that memories of home ease her worries. After all, I don't think she'd be so confident using this technique on others if it didn't work for her. A potential example of these memories are likely her childhood moments spent with her best friend, Etier. Like the other 2 support chains we've looked at so far, Céline's supports with Etier are pretty fundamentally simple. There arguably isn't even a real conflict here. Their supports are one of the surprisingly rare cases in Fire Emblem where 2 characters with a pre-established relationship just get to hang out and chat, like friends. In that regard, the support chain is a reasonably unique one specifically for Céline, too. She's usually very formal and proper with her support partners, but here she's more than happy to tease Etienne about her palate, or lack thereof. However, their B support does reveal that the two of them first started to spend time together while Céline's brother, Alfred, was still deathly ill. At this point in her life, Céline's father had already passed, and with her older brother's death assumed all but certain, the mantle of future leadership fell on her shoulders. It's not so hard to imagine that tea time with Etienne, then, became one of her main escapes from all that. A respite from the gloom, pressure, and severity of her situation. However, I do admit, despite the appealing circumstantial evidence, this may be a slightly too specific thing to assert. Though I have no doubt that this time in her childhood with Etienne is part of what calms Céline's mind when under stress, considering the sheer amount of generally Pyrenees tea she drinks, it seems even more likely that the best benefit tea grants Céline is a reminder of what it is she fights for. Her one true love. Pyrenee. Wrapping up all of Céline's tea-centric supports is the first one to actually put her in the spotlight. Her supports with Lapis have her teaching Céline about the value wild plants can provide. Of course, using wild plants as tea leaves is the catalyst for the C support. Become the B support, Lapis is teaching her things like what wild berries can and can't be eaten, and how to treat burns with moss. It was this sort of information that Céline was really after. In the A support, Céline reveals that she was collecting this knowledge as preparation, in case Pyrenee would ever need such utilitarian advice. Pyrenee is a fertile kingdom, that's half of what all the flower iconography symbolizes, and Céline proves wise enough to know that this is no permanent guarantee. A few bad harvests, or even invasions from other nations, and the stability that Pyrenee enjoys would be lost. Though she admits that it may just be preparation for a worst-case scenario, her willingness to actively prepare for any eventuality shows not only Céline's wisdom as a ruler, but also the powerful love she has for her people. And I do want to call attention to that. In this A support, Céline doesn't call them the people of Pyrenee or my mother's subjects. No, she calls them my people. So, now that we've established another concrete part of Céline's character, let's move on from the tea and start to talk about Céline as a leader. The two supports that look at Céline's political prowess and leadership style are those with Fogado and Alir. This time, though, we'll be taking a look at the much heftier supports first, her Alir supports. Their C support is almost exactly what one would expect. Following an off-screen tea time, the two discuss Céline's affection for tea. However, the back end of this support lays down some key thematic groundwork for the rest of the supports, when Céline tells Alir of a Pyrenees folktale. Supposedly, there is a spirit in Pyrenee that guards the virtuous, and plays tricks on thieves and crooks. Céline lightheartedly remarks that so light a punishment makes for a poor deterrent, while Alir assures her that the folktale is more so a reflection of the kind-hearted Pyrenees character. That peaceful kind-heartedness being the other half of the symbolism in Pyrenees' flower iconography. Alir also remarks on the pastoral life that the Pyrenees live too, but based on Céline's moment of hesitation after their comment, it's immediately obvious that there's something playing on her mind. The B support then gives us a little bit of insight as to what that thing is. Here, Céline tells Alir that her mother has tasked her with handling a band of thieves that have been attacking tea shipments. Almost certainly in an effort to make sure the situation doesn't boil over into one of those worst-case scenarios she was talking about with Lapis, Céline makes her solution very clear. There can be no mercy given to anyone who causes suffering to the people of Pyrenee. For anyone who has played the Fell Xenologue DLC, this attitude of Céline's should be unsurprising. There, for the safety and prosperity of her people, Céline demands an invasion of Brodia in order to secure their resources. For the sake of the happiness of her people, and only her people, she is even willing to die. Our Céline is certainly aware of the inherent contradiction in that behavior, though. Trying to buy peace through violence is something she calls her Fell Xenologue self out for, but it isn't as if her solution to the thief problem isn't also a violent one. I think that attitude is where her moment of pause in the C support derives from. Her no mercy attitude is highlighted in many of her Bond supports. Ike, Sigurd, Micaiah, Marth, Lynn, Lucina, Camilla. All of these Bond supports have Céline reiterate that sentiment. So we know her response to the thief situation isn't an isolated or unique one. And yet, by trying to deter others from causing trouble like these thieves, she herself tramples upon the ideals of peace that she strives for, the very foundation of what Firene is built upon, down to its iconography. The reason Céline hesitates after what Elias says to her in their C support is because she does not believe she possesses that kindness so apparently inherent in the Firene's character. Perhaps it would be expected that in their A support, Céline would have found a middle ground, some path to walk that isn't so light as fairy tale tricks, while not as harsh as execution. But no. Proving her convictions, Céline goes through with her initial plan, assuring Alir that she would do it again in a heartbeat, for no one should be allowed to disturb Firene's peace. Instead, the resolution from this support comes directly from Alir. They assure Céline that she does, in fact, possess that Firene's kindness. That what she does in the name of peace for her people. That the good she brings to Firene outweighs the bad that burdens her heart. Interestingly, though, while Céline appreciates the sentiment in the A support, in her wake-up dialogue that unlocks afterwards, she laments that she still doesn't fully believe that she is a kind person. Even if others think so, she cannot accept it herself. It's a bittersweet way to end off their support chain. I can't help but feel as if that fact makes the support chain resonate with me even more, and further strengthens the already stellar characterization that Céline receives over the course of these supports. As a brief meta aside, I also find it fascinating that the writers chose the Alir support for this characterization. Ever since their introduction to the series, the supports of the Avatar characters have almost always been designed as a way to introduce a character to the player in a simple, easily digestible way. Aside from maybe Robin in Awakening, the supports of the Avatar are the ones players are most likely to see after all, since they can support with everyone. So the fact that the writers chose this as a topic for Céline's Alir support tells me that this was what they wanted you to remember about Céline. Her merciless pursuit of peace, and the internal conflict that gives way to. Céline's supports with Fogado do give us a fleeting acknowledgement of Céline's willingness to employ violence for the sake of peace, but the real value of this chain lies in the information it tells us about Firene's political ties, and in its demonstration of Céline's diplomatic savvy. In their B support, Fogado remarks that Firene is very closed off from the other nations, due to the fact that it is entirely self-sufficient. That makes logical sense from what we've seen so far too. All the solutions Céline comes up with in her Lapis and Alir supports are for internal use on internal problems. She doesn't consider petitioning other nations for aid in her Lapis support. She wants to find a way to internally solve crises. Yet, despite that closed-off nature, Céline proves that she completely understands the ins and outs of negotiation in this support chain. Right from the start of their C support, Céline recognizes Fogado's flirtation for what it is. A tactic to lower people's guard and probe them for information. While she's simply dismissive of his advancements in their C support, she very plainly states his intentions in their B. She knows full well that his invitations for tea are thinly veiled schemes to pry some of Firene's secrets out of her. And in turn, she's also very transparent about how she could use their tea time to get some of Solm's knowledge. I suppose we can add that to the list of things tea does for Céline too. It offers great opportunity to discuss politics. While these supports don't offer anything quite to the scale of Alir's, it is at least very valuable to actually see the fruits of Céline's labours. That all of the training she received in preparation for Alfred's early death did pay off for her. That's also what I would like to focus on to end this character analysis. How Céline's childhood shaped her, as well as her relationship with her brother, Alfred. Back in our discussion of Etier's supports, I already went over why Céline was being prepped to lead Firene. I've already alluded to this time of her life being quite miserable, and on principle it's not hard to understand why. Céline spent much of her life preparing for the day her beloved brother would die, after all. Despite Céline's obvious love of Firene, it isn't as if she has no misgivings about how things worked out for her either. I argued before that tea time with Etier was a key escape from her training. I believe another example of that can be seen in Céline's B support with Chloe, where Céline tells us that she had left the castle incognito several times in her youth. There could be any number of reasons why, it isn't a detail dwelled upon, though I have to imagine her brief travels were another way to leave the royal life behind, if for a fleeting moment. For something much more outright to demonstrate this, Céline's bond supports with Lynn do suggest that, at least in part, Céline wishes she could be free of her royal duties. Again, despite all that drive to protect her homeland, having all the duties forced upon her under her circumstances was a burden perhaps just too much to bear for her, something that very clearly comes through in her supports with her brother Alfred. More than anything else, there is one thing in particular that stands out in Céline's C and B supports with Alfred. They're the only supports where she is actively mean to her support partner. Even with Fogado, she was just politely dismissive. With Alfred, she's much more stern and insulting, even if he doesn't take being called a barbarian as an insult. On a very basic level, these two supports are supposed to show off how different the two of them are. Alfred is spontaneous, a little airheaded, but very loving and kind. Céline is calm and intelligent, pragmatic and devoted to her duties. The two are opposites in just about every way, and I am absolutely sure that a part of Céline resents Alfred for that. This is a sentiment touched upon in her A support with Fogado. After all the training she had to go through, Alfred recovered from his illness. On one hand, she was elated that her brother wasn't about to die, but on the other, everything she'd been working towards suddenly felt like it was rendered moot. Worse than being trained for a position she wouldn't have, all that training fundamentally changed Céline as a person. As observed in her earlier support, she had to harden her heart at a young age, a fact she brings up in her A support with Alfred, where she remarks at how much better he has become at looking for joy in the world than her, especially since the role was reversed in their youth. I don't think that it's something she blames Alfred for at all, but I do think that when she sees the Alfred that we meet in game, she sees all the qualities he displays in their C and B supports, especially his entirely selfless, innocent kindness. She sees that he represents the virtues of the Firenese character, and that she does not. All thanks to the training that she had to undergo on his behalf. I do not want to suggest in any way that Céline hates Alfred, however. Of course she doesn't. Her support chain with Alchrist is proof enough of that. She would not be haunted by nightmares of Alfred's death and react with the genuine anguish she does if she hated him, or even truly resented him. It isn't as if all of her training went to waste. She says herself in a few supports that she can use what she was taught to support Alfred, instead of ruling in his place. Rather, it's that disbelief that she could be considered a good person that we see in her earlier A support that fuels her unhappiness and resentment, especially when she compares herself to Alfred. Obviously, we can see the kindness in her character that she just can't, just like Aaliyah can. But it also isn't as if Céline's beliefs about herself are entirely unfounded. She is merciless. She can be cruel, even if it is for the greater good. For all of her kindness, as mentioned at the start of this analysis, even on a personal level, she is very noticeably stoic and formal in almost all of her supports. There's a certain distance between herself and most others. It's why seeing her relax and playfully tease both Etier and Chloe in their supports is so refreshing. It's also one of the many reasons her support chain with Hortensia is such a standout. It's the only set of supports where she just lets her hair down and indulges in some personal fun for fun's sake. But by far the best example of Céline's very real, very genuine kindness is her support chain with Alfred. If Céline doesn't truthfully hold any hatred towards her brother, why is she so confrontational in their C and B supports? While she does hold some concerns over his physical condition, Her supports with Alcris suggest that seeing Alfred being active actually makes her worry less about him, not more. Surely it isn't as petty as being upset that he might be inefficiently going about helping people. No, I'm quite certain that her disposition is rooted in metaphor. She's specifically upset about the fact that Alfred is digging holes. I'm all but certain that this is a metaphor for Céline being concerned that Alfred might be digging his own grave by pushing himself too hard and unnecessarily. Even if you disagree with that specific interpretation, clearly Céline has concerns about Alfred's long-term health. Concerns that prove earned in their A support. The beginning of their A support gives us a role reversal of what we'd seen up until this point. Céline's stoicism falls away, and her immediate reaction to seeing Alfred in pain is to get him help, only relenting at his own insistence. As for Alfred, we see him weak, vulnerable, desperate, and a little selfish because of his illness. The initial interaction sets the somber tone for the rest of the support, where, as aforementioned, the two talk about their joy and happiness. Aside from her support with Louis, this is the only other support to put a focus on the small joys in Céline's life. But when Alfred asks her what brings her happiness, her response is nothing. Nothing brings her true happiness. She has her small joys, drinking tea with loved ones, of course being the leading one, yet those things cannot make her life a happy one. When she says that she doesn't value happiness as a life goal, it'd perhaps be more accurate to say that she will never allow herself to be truly happy. As far as she's concerned, she doesn't deserve it, because of the conflict between her peaceful ideals and her merciless methods. Even if she's always yearned for happiness, she's seen only misery. Céline is a sad person. Thrust into a position of power due to the deaths of her family members, jaded to the point of personal misery, sure that she cannot coexist with the ideals she fights for. And so she is blind to the genuine effort and kindness that she does enact. Her concern for Alfred and Louis' well-being, the comforting friendship she gives to Etienne and Chloe, all the lives she saves and enriches by fighting for Firene. Despite all that, Céline cannot look past her own perceived flaws she considers unforgivable. The only way to free herself from her world of misery is to show that love and kindness she proudly delivers to her people, to herself. And there we go. I hope you enjoyed that. And I hope you enjoy the background footage of the two supports that I didn't talk about at all in this character analysis. Not to say that they aren't important necessarily. Morvia's support is mainly about him though, and Kagetsu's support kind of just demonstrates the same thing that Hortensia's support does. Kagetsu approaches her as a warrior instead of a princess, and you can clearly see that she talks to him in a different way than she talks to it like most other people. But, you know, I didn't want to just throw it in as a footnote that kind of, you know, seemed a little careless compared to the rest of the essay. I'm sure you can also tell that this part's unscripted. Little less stiff, a little less formal. But hey, that's how I wanted to do the essay. And speaking of the essay, I'd love to know your feedback on it. You know, not just on whether you agree with my interpretation or not, but also if you thought it was any good at all. I've never written a character analysis, or even really an essay of this sort before, so I would love to hear from you guys if you liked it at all, if you thought I was even good at it, I suppose. And hey, I mean, if you did enjoy it, I'd totally be up for writing more of these. Not even just about characters. Well, not even just about Fire Emblem, to be honest. I'm pretty well, I don't know about well-known, but I'm certainly more known as a Danganronpa guy than a Fire Emblem guy, and, you know, I'd certainly be up for a couple of character analyses from games like that. Maybe Rain Code if you're looking for something a little fresher. Particularly with Engage, right? You know, I ironically enough, my mission statement from the start doesn't really hold too much water, I suppose, considering that, especially, well, when it comes to popularity polls at least, Céline actually tends to do pretty well. I don't think she's one of the most despised characters, I guess you could say, for being just a gimmick. But she is certainly one I've seen pointed out the most as one, which is why I kind of wanted to take that angle with this. I'm also sure you can tell that I also just really like Céline, so of course I wanted to do a character analysis on her. You know, bit of a vindication, not only for her, but for some of Engage's writing as well. Not that it's all sunshine and rainbows. One of the video ideas that I do have, that if you're interested in me doing more scripted content, I would be happy to do, is how the Four Hounds are so close to working. They're so close to being good, but because of how Engage handles its narrative, they just fall flat. But that's a topic for another video. And hey, maybe not even a video that I'll be the one to make, you know? And just to take us home here, not that I really need to cite my inspirations, but hey, figures why not? And if you somehow don't know these Fire Emblem creators, but you do know me, I can point you towards some pretty good analysis content and video essays. So, I mean, on the character analysis front, I've got to shout out Ghast and FEMS Paint. My analysis style does lean a lot more towards Ghast's, but, I mean, the fact that they even do character analysis in the first place gave me a little confidence in even thinking about putting this video out. But, you know, I also really enjoy their character analysis content, so, you know, certainly helped in influencing me. And for a final little shout out, I mean, I've got to shout out Bopper. Not only does he do fantastic Fire Emblem video essays, among other video essays, among other topics, I suppose I should say. It was actually his video on the blue curtains that finally gave me that little... Yeah, Bopper's video, I think, finally gave me that boot of confidence I needed to actually sit down and write it. So yeah, I think that's that. Again, thank you so much for watching. I would love to hear what you thought of this piece in the comments. Negative ones as well. Hey, I am all down. In fact, I want constructive criticism, you know? I really would appreciate that. I know again, first time I've done this, I know my writing's not perfect. I know the style isn't for everyone as well. I don't know if everything I said was, like, super clear. You know, I've had this written for about 3 months at this point before the video goes out. You look at a script for so long, and it kind of all just, you know, becomes a bit of a blur. If you've ever written a script for these, you know what I mean. And, like, this video is only, like, what, 25 minutes long? And I managed to squeeze 6 pages of writing out of like less than an hour's worth of content in game. Well, I you know, call me a broken record, but I'll say it once again. Thank you so much for watching. I don't know if I'll see you in another video. Maybe I will. Don't expect it anytime soon, though. If I do, if I do continue to do some video essay content, I will certainly write the scripts if there's a desire for them, but not really going to be in a good position to be well, hell, even writing them, to be honest. I have a... Look, I'm in my final year of university. I've got an entire dissertation to write that's, like, twice the length of this essay. So, you know, I should probably prioritize that over writing Fire Emblem essays on the internet that I'm kind of doubtful even 100 people will watch, you know? So, yeah, you know. Anyway, maybe I'll see you in another one. Maybe I can convince you to check out some of the Let's Plays or Iron Mans on the channel. Yeah. Goodbye!